Alright guys, so I have a client who wants me to make a custom routed sign for a friend of hers for like a housewarming gift. They just got a house and she wants one of those cool custom routed signs for outside the house thing. So in my nearly 20 years of doing custom routed signs, I've done a number of custom routering things. You've seen some on the channel. If you're curious about some of the other things I've done, check out my Facebook page. There's quite a bit of it over there. But in this video, I'm going to break down how I do it. I'm going to explain to you how I do things, how I used to do things, why I do things the way I do, and then give you some tips and tricks along the way. So if you're looking to do some routering signs, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get nasty. So when I first started doing routering signs, I used to do everything completely freehand. I would draw everything out on the wood, try to get all the letters to be very, very close, and then I would just router those out. And then at some point I bought some stencils, and those were terrible to use. But a couple years ago I got a Cricut, so now I just use Cricut software. I design everything on the computer, and then I cut it out as a stencil, and then I trace that onto the wood and then use that. So things have gotten a lot better in that aspect. My letters are becoming more consistent, and everything's just looking a lot crisper and cleaner. So that's what I do, is I just draw it up on here, print it off, and then we'll go back up to the shop. We're back in the shop, and now I've got this thing pulled off of the mat. That's what they call it with Cricut. First of all, normally it comes off a lot better than this and not all wavy, but I got a new light grip mat that apparently could be used as a sticky mat for cows. So normally, like I said, normally it comes off better than this, but this will work. And then what I do is I try to find the center of this thing so you can get it lined up on your wood. Now for this, because I have those oars crisscrossed, that's going to be my center line, and I marked my center on my board that I will be routering out, and I'm just going to put that on there, and then I'm going to tape this thing down to it. So once I have it centered up where I want it there, I double check to make sure that I have it level on there, just measuring to, like I'm going to measure to the bottom of the letters, to the bottom of the board, and that should give me a very good indication to how level this thing is going to be. And that does look good right there. I have that all centered up. Like I said, I'm just going to take I'm going to take blue painter's tape, that's what I have, but just take tape and then tape the thing down so it doesn't move around on you. Obviously, it cut like O's and stuff, it cuts the center out. You have to you can grab the O's off of that mat and put them on here, but you know, I'm just going to freehand those in. Like I said, I used to do this all by freehand, so I have that still kind of mentality with it. But we're just going to quickly take this down, and we're going to go through with a pencil, and I'm going to stencil out the entire thing with the pencil onto the wood. Now I use a sharp pencil to follow these stencil lines. Now I don't use a marker because a marker will bleed into the wood grain, and if you're doing something so small like letters, sometimes that will throw off what the crisp line is and what you actually need to follow with the router bit. So you can see here is that sharp pencil line is really going to be easy to follow with that router bit. Alright, so now we are ready to actually start routering. Now the router that I'm going to use is a trim router. I've had this rigid for over 10 years and I absolutely love it. I have tried to do this custom routering with one of the bigger routers and it's a lot harder. I recommend getting the smaller router. Now you're going to be looking through this window right here because you're going to want to watch where your bit is going. Just a heads up. Speaking of bits, what are we going to use? So whenever I'm doing something like this where there's that detail, or like this has the oars and the trees, is I go and I get the biggest, widest square bit router bit that I can. So this one's going to be a 1/4 inch. and I use that to aug out the majority of the material, and then I go back through with the smaller bits, like this one for instance will be a 16th bit, to try to get in and get that finer detail. Now when you're switching from bits like that, the one thing you do want to remember is you want to set your depths the same, because you don't want to be going too deep with one bit compared to the other bit. So I recommend doing that with just a scrap piece of wood. Run your first pass with your bigger bit, and then set your depth with that pass for your smaller bit. That will prevent that weird depth change right there. Now safety when you're doing this, because like I said, you're going to be looking through that little window. Your face is going to be all up in your router's business. Now what you're going to do is I put on a mask and I put on safety glasses. Didn't wear a mask for a long time. I do now. Safety glasses has always been hit and miss, but I'm really trying to get into it. So I really recommend those two things. Hearing protection also, because you are going to be right by that router, because you're going to be in there. Now if you do make a mistake and say you go over your line a little bit, do not freak out. Just try to trim it, feather it around, make it kind of blend in there. Keep in mind the way that you're gonna have to get a feel for the wood. Watch where your grain runs and all that kind of stuff, because that and the way that your bit spins is gonna affect the way that the router handles. So make sure you have a firm grip and go slow. Don't ever try to rush this, because when you rush it is when you'll let the router pull you off of where you want to go. So keep it slow and take your time. So I ended up doing that whole thing with the 16th inch router bit. Now if you're wondering how long that took me about 25 minutes. Now I'm going to show it to you. Keep an open mind. Now you can see that it doesn't pop, that it's not crisp. And that's because you have all these little wood fibers that come off. So over the years, I've done numerous things. I've used a knife, I've just sanded the crap out of it. I've used a flathead screwdriver to scrape. But one thing that I just started doing about 6 months ago is I finally got a little Dremel. And I just take, this one's a grinding stone, I just take a Dremel bit, any kind of grinding bit, and I'm going to run through and I'm going to clean up all that little fuzzies off with this. And you'll see how much difference that makes. So that looks much better. But there's still a couple of spots that have some weird little fuzzies on them, so I'm going to go through with a very small flathead screwdriver, or you could just use a pick, and I'm going to just scrape out around it to get as much out. Now the one thing I will say, your best friend when you're doing this kind of stuff would be compressed air. Now I've thought for years about getting one of those things for cleaning off computer keyboards, but I just never have. Usually though, my compressor will be going compressed air, and it really makes it do it. So I'm going to finish detailing this out, getting this ready to go, because the next thing I do is we got to paint the inside of these letters. Now we are ready for some color. Everything has been scraped out, all the fuzzies are gone. Now there's a few different ways that I have done this in the past. Now you're going to add, I always add a black there to make it really pop out. So like I said, a few different ways I've done this. When I first started doing this, I would just spray paint the entire thing, wipe off the excess, and then sand is forever to get all the black that's soaked in out. And then for a little bit, I went to hand painting it with a brush. That was terrible. That also took forever. And then for a while, I really cheated, and I just used a black Sharpie, which it surprisingly works really well if you want to use that many Sharpies. Now what I do, and as you'll notice throughout this, I'm saying what I used to do when I did. This is still an ever-changing process. Like I said, I just started with a Dremel this beginning of this year, and I just started with this process actually a few months ago. Because now that I have this, your template, I'm just going to stick it back over where I routed everything out, and And then I'm going to go back through, and I'm still going to use spray paint, and I'm going to spray paint it. Now when you spray paint it, you want to hit it at all the different angles, because you want to get up into all those flat spots so that all that color will pop. Now if you do miss anything, I still go back through with the Sharpie and touch it all up. But this, what this is going to do, this paper that's done here, is it's going to keep it from really soaking into the wood all over the place, and you'll have to sand a lot less. So my new template way didn't seem to work this time. I think it's because my letters are so small and thin. Usually I have bigger, thicker ones. And not to mention the fact that, like I said, that new sticky mat for the Cricut really rolled up my stencil. But back to the old school, spray the crap out of it. But I won't have to sand it like crazy. Alright, so this thing is all dry. And like I said, up to recently, I used to have to just sand this down. And that would take forever, because the paint seeps into the wood. You want to make sure that you're sanding absolutely everything so you're not creating weird distortion lines in your piece. But recently I got something that has made my life so much better. See the smile? That's how much happier I am. So recently I got a small portable planer. So now I just feed this thing through, remove it till the point that there's no more extra paint on the surface, and then I just do a finish sand. It is wonderful. And here comes that compressed air I was talking about. You can see how it removes all the dust from inside those letters, and it really makes that black pop. Alright, so you can kind of see this S right here. Paint didn't quite get in there, and a little bit in the H. So now is when I use my Sharpie trick, because you just did black. You just dive it in there. Oh yes, it's filled in. Now that we have this thing actually ready for finish now, little recommendations on a stain. So if you want the letters and everything to really, really pop, what I use is I use a lighter stain to help those black, dark letters really pop. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to use a nice light stain, get this thing a coat of stain on the front and the back, and then we're going to just poly the crap out of it because it's going to be outside. And that is it. So let's do that. If you're wondering why it's oval, it's because when I had it all done, sent a picture over to the client, they asked if I could make it oval. So it's now oval. The way that I did it is I just went over to the Cricut, same way I did with this. Made a stencil of an oval, laid it over, jigsaw, it out, re-sanded it, and then I re-polyed it. The polyurethane that I use is this stuff that I use on my chainsaw bear. If you haven't seen that video, please check that video out, because that video was really fun to make. I guess there was like probably eight coats on this thing. Yeah, so this is where I'm at currently. This is my current process on how I do routed signs. If you're curious on more other routed stuff that I have done, head over to my Facebook page or my Instagram page. You'll see a lot more work of my custom routering there. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot from this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one.